Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Hilmi bin Zainudin. I will represent my group mate to demonstrate a video about vehicle brake system lab 3 drum brake inspection, removal and refitting. So for this lab session we will be performing 3 stage of procedure, which is remove drum brake assembly, inspection of drum brake and refit drum brake assembly. So unfortunately I don't have the vehicle and tools to perform this lab session, but I'm going to share with you a reference video for performing these lab activities. But firstly I will share with you the equipment and tools we use for this experiment. So firstly, of course, we need a car jack to jack the car, and next we need a cross wrench to remove the nut for the tires, but we can also use a air handgun or a torque wrench for that. Next we going to need a hammer. We also need a set of spanner. We can use a plier also to perform the activities, and we also need a screwdriver, and we also need a jack stand to withstand the vehicle. We also need a vice grip, and lastly a grease to apply to the inside the drum brake. And that is the equipment for these activities. Next I will share with you a reference video for this lab experiment. Okay, for the first part of the lab activities, the remove drum brake assembly, I will be using a reference video from YouTube that is performing replacement for drum shoe for Pro2 kancil. And next activity, for inspection drum brake, I will be using my friend video that is inspecting drum brake of Proton Saga BLM. And for the last part, the refit drum assembly, I will be using the same video Pro2 kancil for demonstration video. Before we can move on to the procedure of removing the brake drum, I will explain to you the components of a brake drum. Here is a brake drum which acts as a braking surface on the wheel side. If we open this brake drum, we can find the wheel hub, which is a part to which the brake drum and the wheel are attached to. If we remove this, we can find the back plate, which holds all the brake components together. Here is the brake shoes, which used to push against the inner surface of the brake drum. And here is the brake lining, which acts as the friction between the lining and the brake drum to slow down the wheel spin. Here is the hold down spring or retaining spring, which holds the brake shoes towards the back plate. Here is the top and bottom retaining spring, which used to return the brake shoes to its resting position. On top we can find the wheel cylinder, a hydraulic component used to push the brake shoes. A modern drum brake system are self-adjusting, so when the brake lining is wear out, the system will automatically adjust the brake shoes position. To do this system needs a brake adjuster, adjuster lever, and adjuster spring. On the wheel cylinder, we can find 2 components, which are bleeder valve and inlet port. The bleeder valve is used to remove air in the system, while the inlet port is used to receive brake fluid. Inside the wheel cylinder, we can find a dust boots, pistons, piston cups, piston cup expanders, and a return spring. When braking, hydraulic fluid will push both cylinders' piston, which will push the brake shoes, thus create a friction braking force between the brake lining and the inner surface of the brake drum, slowing the wheel spin of the vehicle. Firstly, use a wrench to loose the nut that attaches the wheel to the brake drum. Release the handbrake of the vehicle and use a screwdriver to open the cover of the wheel hub. Use a plier to remove the safety pin. Use a torque wrench to loose the nut that attaches the wheel hub to the brake drum. Use a jack to jack the vehicle. Use a jack stand to withstand the vehicle, and use a wrench to remove all the nut that attach the wheel to the brake drum. Pull the tires and use a top wrench to loose the nut of the wheel hub. Then we can just pull the brake drum apart from the back plate. Now use a screwdriver to remove the hold down spring which holds the brake shoes towards the back plate. For the bottom retaining spring, we can also use a screwdriver to completely remove it from the brake shoe. We can yank the brake shoes to completely remove it from the back plate. There is a safety cable or the handbrake cable that attached to the brake shoe. You can completely remove it to remove the brake shoe from the back plate. For the wheel cylinder, we can use a vice grip to block the brake fluid hose, preventing the brake fluid from coming out from the hose. Remove the bleeder valve cover and loose a spanner to remove the bleeder valve. Use a spanner as well to loose the nut that attach the inlet port to the hose of the brake fluid, and use a spanner to completely remove the wheel cylinder from the back plate. And that is how we remove all the components from the brake drum. Next, we will be performing an inspection on a brake drum. In this activity, we will be using a Proton Saga BLM brake drum. There are 3 stages of inspection. The first stage is inspection of brake lining thickness. The second stage is inspection of brake drum inside diameter, and the third stage is inspection of the rub test between the brake lining surface and the inner surface of the brake drum. In this activity, we will be using a vernier caliper to measure our finding. For the first stage of the inspection, the brake lining thickness, we will be taking one side of the brake shoe and perform a 3-side reading measurement using the vernier caliper. For the first reading we obtain is 2.70 mm. The second reading is 2.04 mm, and the third reading is 2.20 mm. Next, we take the other side of the brake shoe and perform the same step of measurement. The first reading is 3.16 mm. The second reading is 3.96 mm, and the third reading is 2.88 mm. Next, we will move on to the second stage of the inspection. So, the second stage of inspection, we need to take the brake drum and divide it into 4 parts of measurement. This way, we can determine the offset of the brake drum. So the first reading we obtain is 179.86 mm. The second reading is 180.02 mm. The third reading is 180.05 mm. And the fourth reading is 179.93 mm. Next, we move on to the third stage of inspection, which is the rub test. For this rub test, we will determine whether the surface of the friction for the brake lining and inner surface of the brake drum has a roughness or a smoothness. From this, we will determine either the brake drum needs to be changed or the brake shoe needs to be changed. For the procedure of refit drum brake assembly, firstly, we need to clean up the back plate. Use a cloth or an air blower to completely clean up the back plate of the vehicle. Apply grease before working the installation of the components to the back plate. Use a spanner to tighten the nut of the back plate to the wheel cylinder. Install the brake fluid hose. Tighten it with a nut. Use a spanner. Next, install the bleeder valve. Also tighten it with a spanner and clean up all the excessive fluid. Next, for the installation of the brake shoe. Firstly, we need to remove all the spring and components from the older brake shoe. Don't forget to remove the brake adjuster lever, adjust the spring, as well as the parking lever, and install all the components to the newer brake shoe. Use a plier to refit all the components and spring to the newer brake shoe. Make sure all the components is fitted correctly. Install the adjuster brake. Refit both of the brake shoe together. Before, install the top retaining spring, which will hold both of the brake shoe together. Install the top spring for the brake adjuster. Then we are good to install on the back plate. Insert the cable handbrake first to the newer brake shoe before refitting it back to the back plate of the vehicle. Install the bottom retaining spring to hold both of the brake shoe together. Next, we can install the hold down spring to hold the brake shoe completely to the back plate. Use a screwdriver or a plier to easily refit the hold down spring. Clean the brake lining and inside of the brake drum before refitting it back to the back plate. After the brake drum is fitted, make sure to tighten the wheel hub nut. Use a torque wrench to completely tighten the brake drum to the back plate. Insert the safety pin to the bolt of the wheel hub and close the wheel hub with the cover of the wheel hub. Remove the vice grip from the brake fluid hose. Install or refit the wheel of the vehicle and tighten the nut on the vehicle wheel to the brake drum. Repeat the process to the other side of the wheel of the vehicle, and that is how the procedure of refit drum brake assembly is done. Thank you.